welcome to the New Earth podcast, which will guide you towards awakening and the embodiment of your highest self through holistic living advice, science, yoga, personal experiences, and expert guests. Let's grow together and build a new Earth. I'm Nancy Crupi. I'm a scientist and I have a PhD in biology and 15 years of international scientific research experience in fields from inflammation to aging, neurobiology, nutrition, metabolic disorders, and much more. I'm also a Kundalini Awakened spiritual teacher, healer, and coach, and I practice and teach Kundalini Tantra.
And I'm Robie, Newman-Paris. I'm a biologist with experience in neuroscience, and I've studied the ancient yogic sciences as well as other Eastern philosophies with gurus and yogis while spending a year and a half in India and in Bali. I now teach Kriya Yoga, breathwork, and meditation and help guide people in their spiritual development.
We're here today with Tom Rossi, who is a musician and he works on transcendental meditation. And he has a very interesting life story about music and the use of music in so many ways and in so many settings and also in different countries. So I really like his experience. When I met him, I realized that he really had this deep, interesting story about how he got here to do what he does today, which is transcendental music experiences. That's what he gives to people. And he actually gave us a sample of what he does right here 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry you guys missed it, but it was so beautiful. And we're going to talk about that as well. So let's ask Tom, how you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm a music healer, composer, songwriter, producer. And I've been having a music healing circle, offering it around LA and Pasadena, Santa Monica area. And it's like a combination between a sound bath using the principles of music and a group therapy session. So it's part of this movement of helping our culture relax and dissolve this modern isolation. Yeah.
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, Tom, and how you kind of started on this path of transcendental music, maybe some keystone, big milestone events that shaped your journey and some lessons you learned from them. I know you have a really interesting story, so we'd love to hear a little bit more about it.
Sure. I think it really started when I lived in Africa and Cuba and Brazil. But the first real adventure was living in Africa for 7 months in Ghana and Togo and on the West Coast. And I really got to see music as a powerful spiritual element in the human community, not just for entertainment, but woven in, like the plumber and the electrician and the carpenter, and you have the voodoo drummer. Right.
So they do have really like a space in society, a role in society that is comparable to any other job.
That's right. It's a ancient function.
When do people go to a voodoo drummer, for example?
Well, I know they don't call it voodoo there. They call it vodun, as far as I know. And I was with the Ewe people in Togo, and I was in this village called Vaughan, which is a particular voodoo belt there, and very strong. And I remember the ceremonies would go for days.
Wow.
You'd go to sleep at night and the drums would still be going and the bells and the shakers and the songs, and you'd wake up and they'd still be going, and they'd have tag team drummers where you'd get your relief team coming in after 12 hours of drumming straight, so. And there was also like you'd have the more secular drumming, which is like for parties and things like that, celebrations. And then you'd have the spiritual sacred drumming, which is, always in the private quartier, they call it. It's like the walled house with a couple units inside. And so you'd always hear from behind the wall, the bells and the shakers. And I guess the most amazing experience was attending some of these voodoo ceremonies. And it was like you'd have four drummers, two shaker players, a couple bell players, and then you have a group of men and women singing. And they generated so much energy with no electricity. It was like the earth opened up, and I heard the throbbing heart of the earth that these people were creating with just these acoustic instruments and these voices. And it was more powerful than a rock concert in a giant stadium. I mean, it showed me that you don't need all that stuff to generate so much beauty and power with music. So that really moved me. And then coming back, this was like 89, 90, coming back, and the Batman movies had just started in America, and all this superhero fantasy stuff, which is cool, but it was like I was like, give me traditional ancient wisdom right now.
You're in
I'm
another world.
kind of done with the American, immediate gratification culture and all this stuff. So I was just deep into the drumming for a long time. And then that sort of evolved into I went to Berklee College of Music, so I learned a lot about Western harmony and writing and arranging, and then I started recording. I had my own recording studio and producing out of there and writing my own stuff in New York. It's a great time. And then but the spiritual element was really important, so I gravitated more towards the healing side, and I was playing for hospice patients for 50 years in Brooklyn, and that was like the next level for me.
So you were playing for people that had illnesses, like types, or were just elderly?
Terminal illness, yeah,
Oh,
or
terminal
people who
illness,
are
yeah.
at the end of their lives, basically. And
Did they have like also mental illness, like Alzheimer's disease? Because there is like a lot of literature on the use of music as a
yeah,
therapy for these sort of illnesses,
yeah,
especially, yeah.
yeah. I mean, there a lot of folks had all kinds of stuff at that time of life. The body's just breaking down on all levels. So, but it really taught me the real deeper difference between music as entertainment, which is how I grew up, and music as a service, serving something deeper. And so coming from Africa and also studying Indian music, just really absorbing the world culture, the ancient culture of music. I got to really serve with the hospice patients, with the terminally ill folks and their families, and that was beautiful. So basically, I'd walk into a room and I would know after a while that if a patient was agitated and in pain, that I could play for 3 or 5 minutes and sing in the right kind of way, and I could put them to sleep. I could relieve their pain in a very short amount of time, just with the sound of my voice and this harp here. It's called a kora, or I play guitar, but always very open tunings, very resonant, and a lot of harmonies and soft tones with my voice, with between the instrument, was very important. So it was really developing this modality of serving and being present in the moment. It's not a performance. It's I'm with you. Like I was just playing for Nancy here, and I improvise a lot when I do this kind of work, because I'm sensing like what Nancy is feeling, maybe what she needs. She might tell me, or maybe I might sense something, but I sort of create this feedback loop where I'm sensing her, and then I'm playing it back, what she needs, what I feel, and there's this nice feedback loop. So I'm receiving her, and she's receiving me with
It
the
was kind of
music.
like a form of guided meditation, I would say, because you also at the beginning, you kind of like tell people something, tap into this, do this,
Yeah.
try to use the music, basically transmute the energy of the music into whatever serves you right now. That's what he basically told me in a way that was very customized to me. And it made total sense. And it was really exactly what in the end happened during the ceremony, during the music that he was playing. And it was so beautiful. And there are a lot of studies on, like, scientific studies that show how music can be definitely healing, but in a real sense, in the sense that it triggers, first of all, music affects the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that regulates heart rate, the contraction, like the muscle tension, and also breathing rhythm. So it really regulates our body in a very deep way, which also taps into pain, the feeling of pain, because it also involves it's regulated, like the autonomic nervous system works with adrenaline and noradrenaline, which are very important also to feeling pain. And also music elicits or modulates the opioid system in our body, which definitely impacts on how much pain we feel. So it makes total sense that people can actually feel better, like release pain thanks to music, because literally music elicits the secretion, like modulates neurotransmitters and molecules in our body that are important for sensing pain. So that is so true. And also, and I felt it too when you were playing, music also modulates the production of serotonin, and serotonin is the hormone of happiness, you know? And so it makes you feel good. And serotonin on its own also kind of deactivates and modulate the effects of other things like pain, you know, like if you're happy, you usually don't feel pain. So it's really like music makes you tap more into the good feelings, into the feel good modality, and releases and let go of the bad feelings, negative feelings, and pain. So it really makes sense that you were playing at a hospice, you know, and I love that you did it actually. And I'd like to hear more about that as well. And what kind of music were you playing for them? Like, was this same instrument?
Yeah. I played this instrument called a kora.
Which I love, actually.
And it's a cross between a spaceship and the Brooklyn Bridge.
So what are these things for?
This is just tissue paper. Because it buzzes sometimes, so I just put it in there.
Yeah, it's important to, like, I feel like you make your own instrument as well. Like, you're very wise.
Yeah, I made this. I designed this neck.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, yeah?
The Rossi design. Actually, not so practical changing the strings, I've discovered. It's kind of pain in the butt, but it's a work in progress, but it sounds beautiful. And it doesn't quite come across here on the recording.
Just for you guys to know, at the end of this video, we're gonna have also a video in which he actually plays and records in his own recording studio. So we're gonna have a top quality concert from Tom. So if you just want to listen to his music, just wait until the end of the episode and just listen to it. In the meantime, he's gonna give us a little sample.
But you can see how I play it as I'm plucking with two sides on these strings. But anyways, this is the beautiful harp lute from West Africa.
From West Africa.
How do you call it again?
Kora. It's called a kora, K-O-R-A. And it also has a cousin named Ngoni, which I just got. And that's also part of my new musical family now, but it's a little smaller. But these harps are indigenous to West Africa, this particular design.
Have you ever played or been at Ganawa music concerts? Because Ganawa music is another type of transcendental trance music.
I have. Yeah, I love that. I love it.
I love Ganawa. Ganawa is a music. It's basically a concert in which there are mostly like 5 people and that play. How do you call these instruments?
Good question.
Well, I don't know. Well, like, you know, what's the regular name in English? There are a lot of these.
Like little clappers.
What?
Yeah. They're a metal, 2 metal kind of clacker. It's
clackers. So they play clackers and everyone has their own
one of my favorite
rhythm.
Instruments.
Yes, and they have their own rhythm, and they just have to play. Every musician has to play their own rhythm for the entirety of the concert. That's it. That's all they have to do. And then there is someone playing a chord instrument, usually a guitar, or like probably something like a gumbri. I don't know the name of it.
Yeah.
And the whole concert is just they keep doing this And it's literally as if they open a portal in time and space. It's incredible, the effect of this thing. It made me go into their
Check out
ancestry.
Hassan Hakmoun. He's the master. I remember when he came to the United States and did some of his first concerts when I was in college, and it blew me away. He's just playing this gimbri. I think I'm pronouncing that correct, but it's like a little box, a wooden box with a skin over it, and it's like a bass guitar. So it's like a broomstick with a box, and he plays it, and it's just these powerful, and it is a trance music culture.
Isn't it interesting that all of these places, especially in Africa, where Africa and Cuba, it's interesting that you've been into these two places where music has such a powerful transcendental effect, and people do use it, do incorporate it in their daily practice, in their daily activities. Isn't it funny that those are the two places that capitalism is targeting the most, where, you know, because you can't make music illegal, right? So, you know, you can't ask people to make psychedelics illegal. But it will be looking very bad if they make music illegal in a place that is supposed to be a democracy, right? So they just target all the other countries that instead have these sort of practices. It's crazy, really. Like, it's interesting how
Africa is a very powerful place.
Yes, I've been in Kenya, and I understand when you said you came back, you're like, I want something different now.
Yeah.
Because I've been in Kenya, and when I came back, I've been there for like 15 days for like a vacation, like a long time ago. But when I came back, you know, there it's like everything is so slow, and so I feel like people are really in their own rhythm and aligned with nature in such a beautiful way that doesn't care about the, you know, this capitalistic rhythm that we have, that we are always in a rush. They're really aligned with nature in such a beautiful, wonderful way. And once I came back, just already at the airport, I was already like mind blown by all the noise and how people yell all the time. And it was so like cacophonic, you know, like it was so like, it really felt bad. I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, it really felt like a violence to my body and to my brain after being 15 days in Kenya in a time that was not really the high season. So I was really like with mostly African people. And they say pole pole in Swahili. Pole pole means slow, slow. That's how they say they do things. Pole pole, right?
But you feel the disconnection here. I think this is the Western culture is deliberately disconnects itself and believes that humans are separate from nature. And in a way, that's the great mistake. So everything in our culture is built on this mistake in a way. And you can see the suffering that it creates, whether it's pollution or
not only the suffering, but also
resource hoarding or any of this kind of thing. Yeah, so you feel that when you come back.
Because if you feel like, I wrote a book, like I often talk about my book, like The Fractal Universe and the Theory of Everything, in which I explain how really nature is made of the same patterns that repeat themselves over and over and over. And once we understand that, we as a body, and we as a society, and we as a personality types, and all of these, what society, you know, sociology studies, it's really the repetition of the same patterns. And so you can gain wisdom, the same wisdom that you need to interact with humans. You can gain it by observing a plant. You know, like it's really like the same exact mechanism. But if people believe that they're separate from nature, then they can't gain anymore that intuition from nature. They can't understand themselves anymore. So it's really a way of keeping people ignorant and disconnected from intuition, because at that point they're going to believe, if they disconnect from the truth, then you can accept them with whatever truth you want, you know, with whatever lie.
No thanks.
You know, exactly. Yeah. So anyways,
yeah,
Robie,
and I think this music, is another way to kind of bring yourself back to that state of presence. And what I see in a lot of Western society is, you know, we live too much up here. We live too much in our brain. We're always analyzing things. We're thinking, we're not feeling. But when you break down, you know, the anatomy of how a human functions in an energetic way, we are feeling creatures that think, not thinking creatures that feel. So that feeling is actually a deeper core level of our experience. And what I've experienced with transcendental music and other forms of music that kind of bring you into those more connected, present states of being, that's what they're doing. They're taking your awareness from its little patterns up in your mind, and they're bringing it, channeling it down into your heart space, where you just start to feel. And You know, you
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
out of that constant loop of thought patterns. You stop thinking about the past, you stop obsessing about the future, and you just come into the now, and you start to feel the way that the music moves your body. And another thing that's really interesting with these kind of music, and I know Nancy also has experienced this, but when I listen to this type of music, sometimes I just my body starts moving. It's like I'm just responding naturally, and it's like, you know, you can start with just like something like an ecstatic dance where, you know, people are playing
Mm.
very high vibrational music and you're encouraged to dance in whatever expression you might have. But there's a certain kind of switch point inside of that experience where you start off by kind of deciding, okay, I'm going to do this movement, but then once you get into the flow enough, you're not even really, there's no time to think. You just, your body just moves and reacts to the music, and you kind of
Yeah.
enter the state of unity with that experience, with that vibrational experience. um and you said
That's
you also
beautiful what you
studied
said,
some Indian music too, correct?
Hmm. A little bit. Yeah. I think I've come around to, I've always loved the sound and I play the Bansuri flute.
Mm.
Um, so I love the approach. I think I've sort of come to it in a deeper way over the last few years through Vedic meditation, through
Mm-hmm.
transcendental meditation practice, and understanding that that's at the root. It's the foundation. The Veda is the foundation of India and their culture. As much as the British did their best to try and destroy
Mm-hmm.
it, they actually
Yeah.
amplified it, because now the world speaks English, and now we can actually read
yes.
autobiography of a yogi and have our lives
Mm-hmm.
completely changed and be open to this more expanded state, which you're talking about, which, our culture is completely in the mind, completely in the intellect. And the mind is a wonderful tool, but it's very limited, right?
Right.
And so when we're only there, that means that's all that's available to us. But when we drop into the body, to the feeling states, we start to see that there's so much more cognition and feeling and experience.
I want to tap into this, guys, because I feel like there are a lot of, because like we're tapping often into yoga philosophy and what yoga masters say, and there is a lot of misconnection, unfortunately, between what neurobiologists and cognitive biologists know about the brain and what yoga and meditation and yoga philosophy and music and all that kind of stuff does to the brain, because we are really in a time right now where very few people are understanding what is happening to our brain, because we are at a
Mm-hmm.
time of evolution. And so what is happening to our brain as humans is that we are overcoming the part of the brain that we call the mind, which is the part of the brain that has to do with language. And so we use language and the rational mind, which is mostly in the part of the brain that is lesser evolved, and we're going towards the consciousness, and consciousness is still in the part of in the brain, so it's still the mind, but first of all it's tapped more into perception because it's in the cortex, so it's in the cortical part of the brain, and the cortex is where all of our perceptions are as well. So our perceptions are actually modulated and perceived and utilized by the neurons in the cortex. And so at the same time, once we tap into that part, we don't use language. So the way in which the cortex thinks does not need language, does not need rational thinking. It's a different kind of thing. So, when you have these divine intuitions that
Hmm.
come from really like the consciousness of the whole, they don't come as a phrase to you, they come as an entire concept that your brain downloads. It's really like an
Hmm.
entire concept. It's because the cortex doesn't think in words, doesn't think as a straight line. It's just very holistic. So
Hmm.
it's a very holistic way of thinking. So when we talk about the mind, we often talk about the part of the brain that is the lesser evolved, which is the limbic and the reptilian brain, which are the lesser evolved part of the brain, while the consciousness is more on the cortex. At the same time, and I was reading articles to also prepare for this interview, and I've read that what music actually does, not only music, listening to music, but especially being a trained musician, what it does to your brain is that it doesn't kind of increase the functions you have. What it does is it makes you use better and more in concert the functions you already have. So what it does actually is to increase the white matter. So now most people don't know what the white matter, gray matter actually are. To give you an idea, the gray matter is where the bodies of the neurons are. And the bodies of the neurons are where all the information is stored and where all the functions that we have are stored. While the white matter are the tails of the neurons, where all the connections with each other and with our body are. And so most of the gray matter is actually in the brain and in the spine, while the white matter is the one that basically connects all the neurons to each other and to the function that they need to have. And so like the tails of the neurons can be very, very long because they need to go from the spine to the periphery of our body, to the tips of our toes.
That's the white matter.
Fingers. That's what the
like
white
the wires,
matter.
kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
But also in the brain, we have a lot of white matter, which is the one that connects all the different parts of the brain, and each one, you know, one is for memory, the other one is for perceptions. Yeah,
but well, you said it like it's in concert.
Yes,
no pun intended.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are laughing. Yes.
Yes, and so like what music does, it basically makes us develop more white matter, which basically makes all the different functions of the brain connect with each other better and work with each other better. And also music elicits, for example, what Robie was saying, when I'm in the flow of music, I'm also want to dance, I'm activating my motor neurons, because music activates the motor neurons memory. And it does it in a way that goes straight up to those areas. So if we go through our rational mind, if we are in a rational mind, we go through our rational mind, and then our rational mind tells us, okay, I want to move my body this way. Instead, if we allow ourselves to be permeable to music, it's called music absorption, the capability of really absorb music and to be permeable to it, and to let music affect our body and our mind.
Yes.
When people allow that to happen, which is what your music does, music makes people be more permeable to music, basically, then your body starts dancing on its own. It's a completely different thing. I have it. I have like I call it a form of like motor synesthesia, because but it's really not. It's just that I allow music to flow through me. Just music make me dance, and I become an extension of the instrument that is playing. You know, and I really my body. I do that at drumming circles, for example. If you let your body do its thing, then you're going to discover so many different ways of dancing that you could not make up with your rational mind. Your body knows, has already the wisdom to connect with the music in a very beautiful way that is extremely perfectly in sync. But we oftentimes go through our rational mind first, and then we activate those things. So we just have to let go to make the next step in our evolution. And to let go of the thinking mind, let go of the rational and the part of the mind that has to do with language, and allow music. And music can be a beautiful tool to improve these things, as we said, because it's really the way in which just musicians also have a lot of white matter. So music, it's like listening to music can improve our activation of our cortex, and improve the part of the brain that allow us to use all of our functions in a better way. Because, you know, for example, this is a perfect parallelism with DNA and evolution, you know, because for example, 97% of our genes is the same of the genome of a chimpanzee. But we're very different. So what scientists realize is that most of the differences that we have as compared to a chimpanzee, for example, actually lies in what we once called junk DNA, which is all the ocean of DNA that doesn't codify for anything, that doesn't contain any genes. But what they realize is that part is what actually determines how the genes are used in concert with each other. So it is the same thing in the mind, you know? So evolution doesn't really happen by the creation of new variants, but most of the times it happens by the better utilization of the functions we already have. So music can really help us make the next step in our evolution, because it allows us to lower our defenses and to get to our consciousness and to improve our consciousness from a physiological, anatomical, neurobiological standpoint in a way that is very soothing, and it releases us from pain, and it puts us in a positive feeling so that we can really just passively, just by listening to music, we can make the next step in our evolution. It's beautiful. What you're doing is incredible. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Well, that's why I encourage people to use the music as a catalyst, as to actually shift into, I can receive this, and I might have a feeling that I can't really access in normal life, in this special place, in this safe, sacred place where the music is being played for me in this moment. Maybe I can let it in and let it soften my heart and feel that grief that I can't normally allow myself to feel, or maybe I need to have some understanding. So it's really, in Music Healing Circle, that's what we do. We really work with the music as a healing tool.
And do you feel like you tap more into like people, like how different people, do you feel like you modulate what you're playing and the type of frequency? I don't know exactly how you think, because I'm not a musician.
Yeah, like I said with you, I'm just, I drop in the moment, I'm with you, and I feel, I can't explain, sort of, just I'm sensitive to you and to playing something for you. I'm being seductive. Music is seduction. I'm drawing your mind towards rich tones and harmonies, and particular pattern, or maybe I'm maintaining some frequency, some melody on the kora or on the guitar, and I'm singing into it. So I'm creating more. And a lot of what the magic of African music is, that part of their medicine and their music is the we call it polyrhythm, but it's not polyrhythm really, it's poly patterns. It's layering of patterns where I can keep even on the kora, I can play a rhythm in each finger. Traditionally that's kind of, so with drums, there's four drummers, there's four different parts. Like you were saying, Ganawa music, they hold these rhythms, and they each layer a few different parts, a few different melodies, because you can think of it as melodic as well and harmonic. So you're holding these different parts, and that will create the way to open to the transcendental field. Like, my experience is that the power of music, the great gift of music, is transcendence.
So you feel like the patterns, this is interesting for me. Do you feel like the patterns are important, like kind of drive more people towards transcendence? Because like our cortex works a lot in patterns. That's why I'm asking. Because maybe
Yeah,
that's,
pattern. Well, it's the consistency, like in ceremonial drumming. It's very important, your tone on your drum, like in Santeria when you're playing. It's very important as a conga player that your tone, you can create the same note.
You want a drum?
So it's
I have a drum.
So it's always this dude, and the other guy's going so there's this backbone that you create in the tones, but your tone's very important. So you're creating this melody, and then the tone draws the mind. It's like the mantra in transcendental meditation. It's the same idea. The mind will immediately gravitate to something that's mellifluous and seductive, because we're all looking for happiness. The evolution of the universe is towards greater happiness. So even if we're miserable because we're trying to find happiness. We're doing all these things. We think it's in the outside relative world and all that stuff. But the mind will always gravitate to something that it thinks is going to make it happy. And once it experiences the transcendental state, it starts to know what that deep, pure being of contentment is, and then it'll gravitate to things that it knows will bring it there. So that's the idea of mantra and of music healing.
Yeah, and the word mantra is actually really interesting. It means, in the Sanskrit, it's man and tra are the two pieces. And what it means together is like an instrument of the mind, or a tool of the mind. So
a vehicle.
And again,
a
vehicle, there's many ways it can be translated, but they all correspond to the same core idea, where this is like, a pointer in the correct direction. And when you get into that state, so for those of you that don't know, what we're talking about is called mantra sadhana. Sadhana just meaning spiritual practice, mantra being the instrument or the tool of the mind. So in this
Mm.
practice, what
A
you
mantra, for
do,
example, give an example of mantra, just it's
so
right?
mantras, yeah, there can be many different types of mantras. There's actually different ways that you can break it down. There's something called a bija mantra, which means like a seed mantra. And this is
Mhm.
usually a small single syllable word that corresponds to either, a deity in the Hindu system, or it can be one of the chakras, in your spine. And larger mantras are composed of different verses in Sanskrit, and oftentimes they also contain bija mantras. But for
Mhm.
example, a simple bija mantra is Aum, meaning, which is also the primordial frequency of the universe. What the ancient yogi says that this frequency underlies all of creation, and this actually initiated at the creation of our universe. It was the groundwork frequency. And I think it's actually interesting when you compare the yogic system to even, the Western system. There's a quote from the Bible that I think really kind of corresponds to the same concept, which is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And when you look at that from the yogic perspective, it's saying the exact same thing. It was
Mhm.
this primordial frequency of
Totally.
Om, which existed in the ground state of the universe. And then out of that came all of the other expressions, came all of the other words. Um, and in the yogic science, there's a specific branch of yoga that actually relates to frequency and vibration and how you can use those in your spiritual practice. And this is Nada yoga, and it's the yoga of sound. So there's many
Yeah.
different ways where you can actually employ this technology of Nada yoga. And some of the examples are, listening to transcendental music and, allowing that music to guide you. There's also mantra sadhana, like we were saying before, and how that would work is you're sitting basically trying to silence the mind, find stillness, and then you can start out loud, and then generally you end up going into your head, or you can just continue. You can start from only in your head. You repeat a mantra, and this is usually given to you by a teacher, but you can also find them in the scriptures. And in the traditional Hindu system, there's many scriptures that have many mantras. And if usually you find one that really resonates with you, it just, you feel the mantra, and you read it a couple times, you listen to someone else chanting it, and you'll feel the vibration, the resonance inside of yourself, and you'll know, okay, this is a mantra that I'm supposed to work with. And you basically sit and repeat the mantra in your mind, let your mind start to automatically repeat this mantra. You want to kind of let go of your role as the doer and let the mantra repeat automatically.
Mhm.
And a common way to do this is also with a what's called a japa mala. So you have it's like a string with beads, with 108 beads specifically,
Yeah.
and you rub one bead between your fingertips as you chant the mantra one time, and then when you finish one repetition, you go to the next bead. And again, in the yoga system, 108 is a very powerful number. Um, it's divisible by a lot of other numbers. It has a lot of different components. It's
Hmm.
also the number of chakras that are inside of your physical body, and there's a lot of other significances to this number. But when you do one japa, that will be repeating the mantra 108 times, and you do that by counting on your mala. So when you do this
Yeah.
practice, you'll notice by the end that you're not putting any effort into repeating your mantra, just repeating automatically. And when you finish with your 108 repetitions, or let's say you can multiply by two, you can do as many as you want, usually in a count
Mm.
of 108. And afterwards,
It's
you sit in
interesting
the
that
silence.
you're talking about that, because
Hmm.
my experience, that I'm getting to understand the essence of the Veda and the techniques that have been passed down. So 108 times, like when I do my mantra 108 times, it's it's a particular amount of time, enough time so that transcendence can take place at some point,
Mm,
right? Like
right.
if I chant 108 times with my beads, it's about 15 minutes, depending on how fast I'm going through the mantra, but it's about 15, 20 minutes. And I think it's very beautifully systemized and beautifully mechanical in a way. It's not, because anyone can approach it. It's not woo-woo at all. A lot of the techniques, they're very mechanical and simple, and
very
ancient.
wise.
He's
There's a
very
lot of
wise.
wisdom on how they do
Scientific
that.
even.
And it
Yeah.
helps really in our neurobiology because again, like how he really like, I always try to add, like he adds the yoga perspective, I add the biology perspective of it. So what actually happened is that the part of our brain that has to do with compulsive thinking is the same part of our brain that then when we repeat a mantra, we use that part, right?
Mm.
So usually the part of the brain, which is usually the basal ganglia, the amygdala, and the hippocampus, which are part of the limbic brain and the reptilian brain, they basically are the ones that usually induce us stress because usually we tap into those parts of the brain when we do things that are actually negative for us, stressful,
This is the
anxiety.
lizard brain.
What?
This is the lizard part.
I mean, either the reptilian brain or the limbic brain is like more, they're like the most ancient parts of the brain that we're trying to overcome right now.
Yeah.
So those parts of the brain are the ones where addictions are, compulsive thinking and all that kind of stuff. So because those things are negative and induce us, negative, also the negative production of neurotransmitters and things that are actually negative for us, and actually decrease the level of serotonin. Yeah. So all of those parts of the brain are constantly active. So one way of basically hijacking the system is to give it fluff. So if you give it a mantra, you can use any 2 syllables word as a mantra and repeat it 108 times. And if you do that, you tap into what is called exactly transcendental meditation, which basically you're giving fluff to this thing. You're feeding this part of the brain that is constantly working anyways. You're giving it fluff. So by doing that,
fluff?
Fluff, like things that don't mean anything. You can give it just something that doesn't mean anything. So that instead of feeding the stressful side, you just feed it things that don't create a vicious cycle and
they don't create more thought.
Exactly. Instead, decrease the stress of it. But by doing that, what's the point is that this part of the brain is the one that turns off the cortex. And so if you give it things that don't mean anything to you or that are positive, you turn it off. And by turning it off, you allow the cortex to emerge. That's why we say that if you allow time, consciousness emerges and you get into that transcendental state. Because that's really what happens. It's like you're basically turning off the part that otherwise will turn off your cortex and your consciousness. And by doing so, you can feel after a while that your cortex starts emerging, your consciousness starts emerging, and you get into this beautiful state that is, we call it mindless. Still, we're using our mind. We're just using a part of our brain that doesn't stress us out, and it is more tapped into the consciousness of the whole, the divine side. And also, like, I wanted to add something to what Robie said about the this that constitutes the vibration of the universe. That also in physics there is something called the background magnetic radiation, which physicists said it is basically a radiation that is everywhere in the universe. And that's, like there is a radiation, like a frequency that really permeates everything in our universe. And I myself, when I go into my transcendental states and I tap into the divine and the holy sacred part of the universe, I can perceive this like frequency of holiness that we usually forget about, but it's here all the time in everything, in every music, in every sound, in every plant, in everything. It's the real life of the universe.
This sound is like it's there regardless of whether something's making it or not. There's again in Nada yoga, there's 2 different types of sound. There's a hot nada and anahot nada. A hot nada is a sound like when you'd play with an instrument or me clapping my hands. It's a sound made by bringing objects together. And then anahot nada is, again, it doesn't have to be Aum specifically, but it's a primordial sound that exists without that kind of interaction between 2 other things. So it's one of these, like what you said, this cosmic microwave background noise. And there's different noises that can be associated with different areas. And there's different descriptions. I mean, you can, again, go to the bija mantras that correspond to, let's say, the 7 chakras in your spine. But these can also sound like musical instruments. For example, the sound of your heart chakra can sound like the beating of drums. And that's just what it sounds like without anything happening.
You activated a lot my heart chakra when you was playing earlier. Like I really felt like here it was really activating my heart chakra and my throat chakra, which I think is also the most important part. for actually being permeable and to absorb music is really like the most important part is like our chest, because I really can feel like a lot of people, for example, have blockages in their heart chakra and they're not really capable of empathizing with others as much, because empathy is really the same, a reflection of how permeable we are to the things that are to the vibration, to the sounds, to everything, to people, you know. So I wanted to also ask you to, you know, tell us some story that really touched you and they're like made you get into this, like for example at the hospice or in Africa. Like tell us something.
Well, you know, there's in the 15 years that I played for patients, there was one time when I showed up at the right time and a woman was passing, and it was the most powerful experience. Just to be there was such an honor. And she was around for I think a few years in hospice care.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'd visited her quite a bit. And then I just happened to get there at the right time, and it was such a wonderful experience. And I just sat at her bedside with my guitar, and I was playing a few songs, you know, You Are My Sunshine, and her daughter was there. And that was a big thing for them. And then this beautiful nurse, she knew what she was doing, man. She was at the head of this woman, and she was just talking softly to her. It's okay. It's okay. You can let go now. You can let go. And something just clicked when she was taking her last breaths. I just started strumming the amen chords, we call them. Just C and G, just these, you know, amen. Just soft lullaby. And I could just see her take her last breath. And then that was it. That was it. And
That's very
just to be
powerful.
there for her and her
Wow.
daughter, it was very powerful.
Yeah.
Um,
And the moment of death is, maybe one of the most important moments in our whole life, that included with the moment of our birth. This is, again, in the yogic system, what is said is, the final thought or the final frequency that you leave this world with will determine where you go in between this life and the next life, if you do believe in reincarnation, and also the terms of your next birth. So if you're able to go out on this very high transcendental note, then you'll be able to be experiencing very blissful states in between this life and the next. Whereas if you're kind of stuck in a thought of suffering, then you might go to what, the Christians would consider hell, which is only a plane of your own mental suffering. But the thing that happens when you disincarnate, when you leave the physical form, is unless you've sufficiently developed through your own spiritual practice, you don't have the same capacity to control how you feel. And obviously your feelings you're gonna feel them regardless of if you want to or not. But you have the capacity, the free will, let's say, to kind of direct the ship of your mind and your feelings in a certain direction, to let go of certain things and to move past things and to change the way that you see things through perspective. But once you
mm,
leave the physical form, you don't have that capability anymore. So the frequency that you're feeling is the frequency that you're feeling, and that's not something that's changeable. So it's a very, very
mm.
powerful thing to, what I would call this is like you were like a death doula. You were the person who was assisting in the transition of this soul from the physical incarnation into the beyond. And it's the most important point in someone's life to have that kind of channel or that kind of high vibrational setting around them. So it's a very
Yeah,
beautiful
there
story,
were
and
plenty
you're
of
blessed to
times
have that
when,
experience.
thank you. Yeah. There were plenty of times when I would play for someone, and then I'd go to another patient, and then either a few moments later or the next day I'd hear that they had passed,
Mm.
Hmm.
you know. right? After I played or that evening, like somehow it helped them, like you
Transcend,
say, yeah, like
yeah,
you
let
say, sort
go.
of have a beautiful conclusion on a vibrational level. And they were like, okay, I can go now.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, because it's often, like our fears that again are in our fight or flight modality, right? That keep us stuck here because ultimately, once you realize that you're the whole, once you tap into the consciousness of the universe, you realize that this is just a form. We're not actually going anywhere.
Right.
We're still alive. Like this body is just a form we can have, but
Yeah,
our soul doesn't go anywhere. It's still here.
that's right.
And so most people have difficulties letting go of their body because they believe that is the end. And instead, I feel like with your music, you allow people to realize that this is just a mean. And so you can leave it and go to another medium. This is just the air. It's just another
Yes.
medium for you.
Well,
And
we definitely want to value where we are right now for sure. But
Hmm.
it is about shifting our identity to that I am the universe having a human experience.
yes.
That,
Right.
the Veda, the uncovered, like the Egyptians gave us pyramids. Like every culture has its technological advancements and its genius. India somehow, because they were so protected by the wall of the Himalaya range, and the sea craft wasn't so sophisticated to bring troops to conquer the whole nation. The whole continent of India was able to steep in their own culture for thousands of years. So it seems like to me, from what I know, that especially up in the north and Rishikesh and stuff, the development of an understanding of consciousness has beautifully gone so deep in that culture that they know that they're and have experienced these multiple layers of consciousness beyond sleeping, waking, and dreaming, right? And so that's really, to really start to shift into that identity, and the transcendental meditation has definitely helped me along with plant medicine experiences. um, but I'd say the meditation is a much more gentle, endogenous, coming from
Hmm.
within, which is better. Plant medicine journeys can help, but you got to do the work outside of it.
Right. It's
But it
like the
really,
difference between like
that,
a rocket ship shooting up very fast, but then eventually it runs out of fuel and has to come back down, and, climbing a mountain very slowly where you might get to the same height, but when you get to that height, you know that you have the ground underneath you the whole time.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's,
always say the psychedelics can help having a breakthrough for people to
Hmm.
understand that there are other levels and to see that it's better so that they are
yeah.
motivated to walk the path. But ultimately, you need to walk the path. Like you need to, after you go down in the downward phase, you need to work on yourself and on your psychology and on your habits
Mhm.
because ultimately, to reach that level of highness, your physiology needs to change, your entire surroundings need to change, everything needs to change.
Mhm.
And so they can show you the breakthrough that anchor you to your
Mhm.
next phase so that you
Yeah.
can walk towards it. But ultimately, for you to be there the entire time stably, you need to make changes to do that thing and to allow yourself to
Yeah.
also develop into that higher state because it's also a neurobiological thing. You literally
Sure.
have to feed and develop and activate parts of your brain that you usually don't use often
Yes.
and deactivate others that kind of are obstacles. And
Hmm.
so I love that, like, music is a way of doing it in a more physiologically organic way. I
Hmm.
will say, like, it's a more organic way of reaching the same kind of level
Yeah.
by nurturing your brain, by actually
Yes.
developing the areas of your brain that you need to develop so that it grows organically with your consciousness. And for that, I want to ask you actually, because this is something that I read also. There are articles that show that even just trained musicians have a very different psychology, neurobiology, neuroanatomy than people who are not musicians, because ultimately, as we said, listening to music
Hmm.
does a lot of things to your brain. Having to play music and coordinate your fingers and your body with your motor neurons, with your rational and conscious mind, has requires for you to train certain part of your brain, and listening to that while you're playing all the time, you are
Yeah.
a lot more exposed to transcendental music as compared to your listeners. And so I've read it really that like musicians tend to have a much higher level of consciousness on cognitive functions as compared to people who don't train. So how do you feel like you're different than other people?
You can't play music if you're rigid. You can't play music if you're not empathetic. You have
brain
to
plasticity is actually improved.
You have
music,
to be playful. You have to know how to listen. You have to receive. And you also have to be masculine. You have to be on time. You have to be in tone, in pitch. So it's really the yin yang and the masculine feminine are in full dance as a musician, because you really can't make music without that. You have to be feminine, you have to be masculine, you have to be sensitive in such a way, and you can go as deep in that as you want, into harmony, into counterpoint, and as a composer, it's taking it even further to embody all of the aspects of music, and then the ideas of, what I can do with this, and put this instrument with that, and this rhythm, and then there's that creative element too.
So how do you feel like that? So how do you feel like you're different from other people?
I'm better. I'm just better. No, I think there's a fluidity. I think it's just by nature of the love of music, it gives me this gift that I have to be playful in life. I have my rigid sides. I have my things where I get in my own way, for sure. It's not all rainbows and unicorns dancing on a pot of gold, but it can get there for sure. And it's sort of the transcendental practices that really help because music is also about it's a funny dance with control and letting go of control. Because I need to have control. We all need to be in tune. We need to know what the song is, the form, the rhythm, the tempo, and we're listening. We're holding this thing together by sensing each other. But then you have to, especially if you're, improvisation, jazz, whatever it is in the moment, you need to let go. And especially like when I'm playing in music healing, and I just played for you now, I let you play me. I open up so that I'm not like, oh, I have this cool idea, check this out. No, I'm like, I just sort of let the music start, and then I let your energy inform me, and I let you play me.
Yes,
so
I love this.
so that's the feedback loop, where you hear yourself, you hear your emotion, and like you felt your heart, and you said, I love it. And I feel that, and then I feel you feeling it, and then I play more.
And I think it works the same when I dance at the drumming circle too. Like it really, I felt that we had this conversation through. He was playing my vibes, and it was giving me the vibes. So it was really like a dialogue. And I have the same thing when I dance at the drumming circle, because it's like they're playing my body too. They're playing my body, but as I move, they also see me moving, and I played them, and so they start being more intense.
That was a huge training for me, was that when I was in New York, after I got back from Africa, my uncle Leslie, bless his soul, had a dance studio, Leslie Dance and Skate School. He was a roller skater and one of the best in New York. They called him the skate guru. And he had the hub in New York City for decades. That was the hub for all of the African, Haitian, Cuban, Brazilian dance classes with live drumming. So you had guys coming in like Papalaji Kamara, master drummers from Guinea. You had people would play for Miles Davis. You did all kinds of beautiful, very gifted percussionists would come in. So there was beautiful teacher Richard Gonzalez, and we'd have the Afro-Cuban class every Saturday. It was like church, and the energy would get so strong. And that cycle you're talking about, where the drummer is being played by the dancer and the dancer is being played by the drummer, is so powerful. And that also taught me very deeply about also this empathy dance, and to
Yeah.
receive. And sometimes people would be going into trance, right in the
Yeah.
studio. It would get in pretty intense. It
Mhm.
was a magical experience.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that
it's just
feedback loop that you're talking about also, I think there's an inner component to it as well. And it's, it's like what you said, the masculine aspect, which is the more the mind following that rhythm, and then the receiving aspect, which is the heart. And what this is actually doing is it's building on to a concept called heart-brain coherence. And this is a really important thing also in the field of spiritual development because, and also in neurobiology, we have lots of neurons that connect our heartbeat to our brain. And these neurons are integral in determining our state of awareness in the moment because our heartbeat is kind of like one of the biggest sensors for distress in our body. If we have an aversive
Right.
stimuli, if we have something that pushes us into fight or flight mode, one of the first things that's going to happen, the heart starts beating faster, and that sends all these cascades of neurochemicals that put us into deeper into the state of fight or flight. And with a lot of people, there can be some sorts of miscommunication that happen between the heart and the brain. And this kind of locks us into this state. But when we instead work on synchronizing them, and there's interesting ways to do this with Kriya as well, where you're basically,
Yeah.
synchronizing rhythms around the physical areas of the heart and the head. You work on in training these two centers, both in the biological sense, like the neurons that are based in the heart that control the heartbeat, and the neurons in the brain that are controlling the pace of that and controlling, like what Nancy was saying earlier, the autonomic nervous system. And then also, if you go into the energetic centers, you have the heart chakra here. It's one of the most important chakras for receiving and for finding that loving, peaceful connection with the world around you. And then the higher centers of analysis, like the third eye center, which is it's
Mm.
related to wisdom and understanding and knowledge. And when you kind of
Mm.
connect those two things together, you enter this state where you're not in either one of those two fields, but you're kind of transcending them and entering this field where the wisdom that you're getting is informed through love, and the love that you're receiving can be analyzed through wisdom, so that you're not also in a place where you're too open and you're receiving things that are kind of overpowering you. You're able to kind of modulate that and filter that through the eye of wisdom.
Yeah.
So this is another way that I think music can really help people just build the energetic connection and even the physical connection between the heart center and between the head.
Well, it's also humanly relevant, right?
Hmm.
Whereas when you're working with plant medicine, the plants are going to bring you wisdom and information from the plant world for plants. You know what I mean? Like, which can
Hmm.
be incredible and helpful in their own way. But it's not, you could say it's not for humans. It's not a human world that we're opening up to when we take plant medicine per se. So we're getting a lot of extra information. And in some ways, it's like we're crashing the party of these other worlds where
Hmm.
our consciousness it's not really relevant for us to be there or to see
not
the,
that it's not relevant, it's not I feel like we, like, for the human experience, obviously it is like understanding that we're just one of many,
yeah,
like we are as fungi, like we are on the same level of many other beings,
yes,
we're all the same, as much as a insect, we are the same, like in nature we occupy the same equal position that any other being occupies, but in our human society
yeah,
all of those things are not relevant because we occupy in our egoic modality, right? We occupy a prominent role. We need to talk about what sociology, right? Sociology of
yeah.
humans. So I understand what you mean, that
Well,
it's
like
like,
if a cockroach poked his head in to our realm and all of
yeah,
a sudden was cognizing, like, what's going on? Like,
yeah,
how is that
it's
relevant
not
to the
relevant to him.
cockroach?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Right.
in a way, it's like that for us. And the other aspect, um, just talking about plant medicine and transcendence, is that the plants in some ways the reason why I'm vomiting or whatever in ayahuasca is because it's
Hmm.
stressing my system on a certain level. And a huge part of our illnesses today is caused by stress, the number one, really.
Right.
And in any transcendental practice, and like you say, the sort of letting the mind part, the analytical part, be seduced, and then we open up to the, what did you call it?
The
These.
consciousness,
the
cortex,
cerebellum, the cortex,
the
yeah.
cortical part of the brain.
Then the body starts to naturally release stress in that
Yeah.
state. So that's what's really important. And then we can sort of cognize, we start to get relevant information that me, Tom, as a human living out this Tomness, I
Yeah.
have a particular way that I can align with the progression of the entire universe and help it
Right.
towards that goal of greater happiness, right? So I think the meditation practice, even though the ayahuasca experience was incredible on so many levels, I think the meditation practice, because it's internal and cultivating the human stuff, it's just, it feels just more natural and relevant.
I think you're right. I think the purging side of it also has a lot of physiological reasons, in the sense that, for example, cortisol, you were talking about stress. Stress is determined and caused by molecules that are physically in our body and that affect our brain. So unless you get rid of those molecules, your brain cannot tap into those areas because there are
Yeah.
stress hormones that don't allow it to happen, right? And so the purging is actually a way of like cleansing our body from things that otherwise are of obstacle for consciousness.
Hmm.
And so the purging can be very useful. I think you're a very conscious being, like you have a very high level of like consciousness. But a lot of
Thank
people, a lot of people are not in your level. A lot of people are on PTSD, for example. And so when people are on
That's
PTSD,
okay.
then it's difficult to tap into the consciousness side, because again, their fight or flight mode is very active, and that means that their entire body has a lot of stressful molecules. And if they don't get rid of those molecules, they can't tap into consciousness. So for you, a psychedelic experience may not be extremely relevant, like it can be beautiful, but not necessary, because you already are in that level of consciousness. And we go back to the fact that you are a musician and you have already cultivated the part of your brain.
Yes.
So you're also resistant to stress. Like you got here after Africa, you're like, I don't want Batman, right? But like most people don't see the higher level, and Batman is all they see. So, like all of
Yeah.
these things, like based on the person, the psychedelic experience may actually allow them to tap into the next level. If you're already on the next level, it can be interesting, but not necessary, So I feel like that's important. But like, I also wanted to ask you, because this podcast is about awakening, and during the first episode, we talked about our own awakening experiences. So I wanted to ask you how you have awakened to consciousness. Were you born like this, or like did you have experiences?
I mean, I, for whatever reason in this Tom life, I'm coming to it now, later. I mean, I think I was as confused as anybody. But obviously my life's been on a trajectory to come to this place where I can start to help, to exist in a more aligned state for myself and my life. And then to that naturally I can feel like I wasn't doing this music healing in this way like I am regularly 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because I was not, my consciousness hadn't yet relaxed enough to align to be able to just get things done. Yeah.
Oh.
And so now it's got a beautiful flow and it feels natural. The old me would be hiding in my recording studio, just doing stuff all day and being kind of isolated. So now
So you're
it's
open to
yeah, like
making
I'm
your gift
just right.
to people.
Yeah,
And
more
you think
actually
that was in
connecting to
part
the
due to
physical.
the transcendental meditation practice that you started?
I think so. I think it's all part of it. I think the ayahuasca experience really opened me up vocally too. Like before I did the ceremonies, I would always be worried if my voice would be there or not, if I could, access this and that. No question now. Like there's something about how Madre just
You have unlocked
beautifully
your
blew
thoughts.
me open in the most amazing way. I mean, there's so much that I'm grateful for that experience.
You probably
So it
unlocked your heart
fits.
chakra. That's
It
why
has, yeah,
it
it
happened.
has it's it fits somehow. So and that then it was just sort of like a relay, like, okay, and here you go, Tom. Here's Vedic meditation. Take it away. Now you're like stepping into like, Jedi 101 kind of thing,
Yeah. So what did Vedic meditation do for you?
It really, well, ayahuasca showed me that it is real. Like all these angelic realms, it's not just a concept or a nice idea. I know that there's, indigo beings and all that stuff, the sort of light surgeons and the electric spiders and all that stuff. Um, it's yeah, it's real. It's a very real experience. And I think on so many levels that I really don't have words for, it opened me to that. And then the transcendental practice of meditating 20 minutes twice a day. Again, it goes back to that ability to release stress, to release more stress than I'm taking on. That's major. And that's just a simple mechanical technique that anybody can do. And now I don't have any sleep issues. I have more energy. I have more ability and power to do things, to just make decisions clearly, to understand and read people clearly myself. It just sort of really, like, I think that alone, just that pattern of releasing stress just allows everything else to come online in a clear way. I think we're not really aware of how destructive levels and states of stress are in our
Yeah.
culture.
Until we are in them, like we're
Yeah,
really completely
Right.
unaware, because if you are in the brain fog, you don't know you're in the brain fog.
yeah,
So that's really what PTSD in the end is. And
that's
once
right.
you nurture that with transcendental meditation, Vedic meditation, once you nurture the cortical part of your brain, the consciousness side that turns off the fight or flight mode, and that allows you to strengthen your cortex. And so even if you go through stress at that point, you can keep the witness modality active. You can keep being the observer.
Yeah,
You can keep seeing yourself undergoing stress. And that becomes a trigger for you to be like, okay, I should stop now because
yeah.
I'm about to undergo stress and to become unconscious. And so
Well,
you can keep more
also,
in your consciousness.
I really understand that I'm not my thoughts. I'm not what I'm doing. I'm the source of my thoughts. I am the source of my doing. Um, yeah, there's something where I'm really actually starting to experience that I am the universe in this Tom body, in this Tom life, doing Tom things, you know? And I'm starting to see how my dharma, as we say it, which means is basically my aligned purpose, has to do with music and healing and providing this way for people to reveal the transcendental state through music. So people who don't have time to meditate or don't even cognize what that is, it's all Greek or something. I don't, I just want to relax. Fine, let's relax.
And it's interesting that you said that you're really experiencing this being the universe into Tom's body, because when he was playing earlier, that's exactly what I had, what I felt. Like I tapped into my highest self, which usually takes a lot of meditation to tap into that kind of level. And instead, with just a few minutes of his music, I tapped into my highest self, and my highest self is the universe experiencing the life through my body. And so I start seeing my body, myself as Nancy, as a very like small character in the world doing its own thing in this very limiting way due to the limitations that my body allows, that my body has. But like I'm really the universe trying to vessel to channel the universal consciousness in the divine actions through a
Right.
body that has limitations instead. So I start seeing these bodies as a very minor character instead of identifying with it, which is exactly the feeling you're describing, I think.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I
It's
think at this point that by playing this music every day or by listening to this music, people can really tap into that, which is what we're supposed to do. Like this is really our next step in our evolution, to understand that we are the universe experiencing life through our bodies. Like I have written a beautiful analogy to explain this in my book, in which I explain, like, imagine, I think this is very powerful, like imagine the universe is like this. Imagine, and I'm also Italian, so it's kind of funny that I described it this way. So imagine the universe as a pot with a tomato sauce in it, right? And so this pot is boiling, is simmering, right? So now imagine that because it's simmering, because the temperature rises, then bubbles start forming on the surface of this sauce. And then because it keeps simmering, the temperature rises, then these bubbles start popping out of the sauce and making a trajectory out of the sauce and then falling back into it. So now imagine that these bubbles suddenly start having eyes, and they start looking at the horizontal plane and seeing each other, and they start thinking, every time they pop out of the sauce, they start thinking, oh, I was born. And every time they go down back to the sauce, they think, oh my gosh, I'm dying. And they start to make this trajectory out of the sauce as long as possible, because they identify with the bubble, just because they've forgotten that they are pieces of the sauce that detach from the sauce. They're
Very
just going
Italian
back
metaphor.
Yeah.
I said it
Are
at
you
the very
Italian?
beginning. I said it. So I'm sorry.
I like it.
But yeah, but this is exactly what we are. We are just the bubbles that we have forgotten, because we have eyes, and because we have eyes and perceptions that really come from our body. We identify with this piece of matter that really simply detached from the universe, from the earth. We are the bubbles of the earth. That is, the center of the earth is hot, like, so the earth, our planet, is simmering, and we are simply the bubbles that detach from it and go and make a hyperbolic trajectory around it for a few years, and then we go back to it. But we are the earth, as much as we are the universe. So we're just bubbles that detach, and because we have eyes and perception, we forget that we are the whole thing. But getting back to consciousness, or being close to, that's why people who have near-death experiences have this, then come back with a higher consciousness, because getting to that level, then it's when the consciousness of the whole gets back to us. We reconnect with it, and we realize, oh, I'm actually the whole. I'm not this body. I'm still alive, even if I'm not in this body, So that's really like
I think
what you're
really...
doing. We are tapping into with music, and without having to have a near-death experience, you're tapping into the same kind of feeling that we need to have for our next revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is that identity shift to being, we're not the surface. We're not just the wave on the ocean or the bubble in the tomato sauce. We are the tomato sauce for the whole thing.
We're the whole ocean.
Right.
And that's really empowering, right? Like when I really relax into it, it's like, oh, I have the whole universe at my disposal. If I can relax and open up enough, that's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
powerful.
That's
Very powerful.
awesome to get.
One guru from India that I really connect with is Paramahansa Yogananda, and what he says is that meditation is the practice of relaxing in an upward direction. So it's like the more that you relax and kind of let go of this identity or this role of Robie or of Nancy or of Tom, and you start to see, okay, wait, I'm just part of this bigger structure. And another beautiful metaphor that I really like is seeing yourself as the sensory organs of the universe, right? Because without a being that was supposedly an individual, we would have the universe, which is our true self, would have no way of kind of interacting with itself or understanding its own substance. So it created these egos and these bodies as this kind of vehicle, almost like, one of the cells inside of your eye that's picking up on, the different frequencies of light. We were sent out into this plane of existence to observe and to report back, to see what we can see, to absorb the structure of this substratum of this plane of existence, and to understand it through our own each unique individual lens from whatever facet of the universe we have been given for this lifetime, so that we can build on the wholeness and to understand the wholeness from a new perspective, and then eventually integrate that wholeness into the the wholeness that already exists. So it's a process that's almost, it's beyond time. When we look at it through the lens of time, it kind of doesn't make sense. We're like, okay, how can something both be whole and also integrating parts of itself into that wholeness? But it's something that doesn't exist in that framework. It's something that this wholeness exists beyond the space and time. And when we enter into this three-dimensional world where space and time are an aspect of it, it seems like we're in this flow of time, but really the time is all, it's all one. You know, the past, the present, the future, they're all happening at the same time in this God's eye or universal eye view. And we're kind of just this one little blip in that five-dimensional stratum that's seeing this one point, feeling this one point, and taking that information back to the source.
Yeah, and the little blip, it's like, and the ego self, this is really important. So coming back from the bigness, we bring great value to the smallness, to this point of consciousness that we are, and then align more, right? It's like it's not to diminish the ego or to say that it's in the way or something. No, it's the tool, it's the lead actor in the play that's getting the stuff done on behalf of the universe, right?
Yeah, because in the
Exactly.
present without ego in the end will not do our thing. You know, like I think my view of the ego is that it's really necessary when we are unconscious, because again, when we're in our fight or flight mode, in that part of the brain where we're not conscious of what we're doing, imagine if the universe had to rely on us being willing to do what we're supposed to do. For us to do that, we will never do that. So it has to give us an ego, so that the ego drive us to do what we need to do. And the fight or flight mode, really, it's a way of creating buttons that, you know, once you press them, something happens, right? And so we just have these triggers and things embodied in us, you know, and built so that no matter what, even if we are unconscious, we keep doing our job, right? And so but we need to get to the next step, because that is very stressful for us, right? So the next step is to get rid of the ego, but to use it to our advantage, and to be the observer.
Not get rid of the ego though.
Get rid in the sense of
It's
use
to
it as a
align it.
tool.
Yeah.
To use it as a tool, but like to not be it, you know, to get rid in our consciousness, in our identification with things. This is my view. What's your view?
Well, there's a big misinterpretation sometimes in Buddhism, is that they shun desire, because I think the Buddha at one point said, we are not the author of our desire, which can be interpreted that desire is bad, but no, desire is important. Desire is exactly what we need to realize, because when we're aligned, that's the desire of the universe. So, but we're not the authors. We don't make it up. There's nothing made up. We are simply here acting out a progression of everything, and we have a personal role. You know, Nancy, you have things to do for the entire universe, and so do I, and so do you, right? So yeah, it's really coming from that place, I think, right?
Yeah, I understand. Like I actually agree with you in the sense that, like, also I had a lot of like holy and divine experiences, and I tapped into the consciousness of the whole and the divine realm and God, and I awakened to the dimension of Jesus and to the Holy Spirit as well.
That's a good one.
Oh my gosh, it's been like the most remarkable experience of my life.
Pretty cool.
Yes. And so I understand how Buddhism is really like, it's a different type of, like, I feel like Buddhism can talk about the whole consciousness side of things without having to tap into the divine side of things. But ultimately, the divine side is the environment within which everything happens.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's the bigger side as compared to the Buddhism. Like, I feel like the holy and divine realm, it's the actual medium where everything happens. And Buddhism describes the physical in terms of like consciousness side, the consciousness way in which things happen in the non-physical world, but doesn't necessarily talk about the divine side of it. But the divine side of it is what gives you the purpose, because there is a purpose, and the purpose is ultimately to allow the universe to bloom towards the best, as you said,
Yeah,
towards
I
like
think
a
so.
better, towards something better, and away from the darkness and towards the light. That's really what we're trying to do. And we all have a purpose, but because we don't know what our purpose is, we need to have an ego for us to fulfill that purpose no matter what. So my way of when I say to overcome the ego, I think that really we need to understand that we are not that it's just God using that ego for us to have our purpose, but we are not the ego. The ego is really like, it can also, if we don't understand that the ego serves a purpose, we can also become very bad people. Like bad
Well,
people like are very much in their
that's where
ego.
the whole idea of karma, because okay, say I'm not so conscious and I'm doing heroin and I'm stealing things. Well, I'm just going to serve a certain aspect of the universe until I'm able to become conscious in this life or the next 100 lifetimes. So maybe I'll come to a place where I can say, "Oh, okay, I see." So, if I'm not conscious enough to experience alignment yet, then I'll be part of
Another
the
purpose.
other, so
Yeah, absolutely. We all serve a purpose no matter what,
yeah,
but like going
Right.
towards consciousness, what the universe ultimately is trying to do is to get all of us to the same level of consciousness. So if someone is very unconscious, then there is you who drags people towards consciousness. I really loved it. Like when I met him, I really felt that he was this like tree that kind of sees other people as squirrels going around, very unconscious, and he's steady and he knows. And so he knows that you don't know. And he's just there waiting for you, patiently waiting for you to allow him to guide you, once you get there. That's really how I perceived you the first time that I met you. And I feel like that's the highest level
like
of
a tree,
consciousness. Yeah, because that's where, like, as we also
looking
grow
at
older,
squirrels.
like we grow older and we like are more conscious,
Yeah,
not necessarily with age, like it's just a matter of like
yeah.
being more conscious. We become more and more like understanding of the fact that we all are on the same path. We all are on the same
Mm-hmm.
journey, but it
Mm-hmm.
takes time
Yeah.
because physiologically changes take time. Time is a real thing in the sense that everything takes its own time to happen. And for time, I don't mean a unit of time, but it takes, for example, a person that has a very intense life is the number of movements that you make in
Yeah.
a certain amount of time, that
Sure.
determines how much you actually
Mhm.
change. And so if people have a very intense life, they can become enlightened at 20, like they don't need to get to 50 to become enlightened. But like,
Or also, and I know this with, this energy of we want to fix people and say the right thing to help them, but
that doesn't come
some
often
of
from a
us,
place of consciousness,
but
absolutely.
some of us might have to live a few hundred
Like,
lifetimes
oh, absolutely.
going through a gradation of ignorance to, come to something. So it's a
Because
good
not
thing
just
to tell
about
yourself when you're with someone that's you really want them to
to
listen
awaken
to
for you.
you and
Yeah,
awaken and all this stuff. And it's important to see people for where they are, and that
yeah,
their consciousness can only create that which it is. It
yeah.
can't, a walnut tree can't make peaches.
Exactly. And
So
exactly, I love what you said because it's really about the physiology. Because we all are born with a certain brain, in a sense, with a certain personality type, with certain brain areas made in a certain way. So we really are anatomically different. And so some people have anatomical limitations, like impairments in terms of capability of reaching consciousness. Because if your cortex is very underdeveloped, I can try to awaken you, but you don't have the anatomical areas that you need for you to reach that level of consciousness. And so you need to reincarnate in a new body
yeah.
so that you have the tools to reach through that body. We really like the universe is currently the earth is made of patches. Some patches are more awakened than others, like India, for example. Like it's more awakened patch. The United States are more, I feel like actually, I like what you said at the beginning, that you said the English people, British did not understand if they were actually helping
Mm.
Indians because by trying
Uh,
to suppress it and
mm.
by teaching them English, now they allowed it to, because that's how the
Well,
universe.
they did do a wonderful job of destruction,
I
unfortunately.
mean, they did,
You
but
know, it all
everything,
sort of plays out.
but it's all
Yeah.
everything, it plays out always in the same way,
Hmm.
because even here, for example, even the fact that capitalism is trying to oppress people consciousness, because they need for people to be unconscious for them to be good customers, good consumers, good patients, right? But at the same time, they don't realize how the universe works. The universe works like this: the more you push and you stress it out and you apply stress to the universe and trauma, the more the universe blooms into a flower of consciousness. And so it's really something inevitable. That's where the universe is headed. And so the more people make wars, that part of the universe is going to bloom faster and be pushed, towards awakening. By doing that kind of violence, they're awakening the rest of the world to that trauma. And
Yeah.
so everything just, there's nothing else you can do, because whatever you do, it tends to scream and to create a reaction that ultimately brings consciousness,
Yeah.
awakens people. And even that, like, for example, I have a lot of experiences in my life in which, because of my physical appearance, the fact that I'm like this pretty woman, like kind of like cute, I had a lot of like toxic relationships, for example,
Mm.
but those relationships kind of allowed me to get to places where I would have not been otherwise able to go. So
Hmm.
I feel like the
Yeah.
universe designs us.
Necessary training.
Yeah, so it's like it designs
Yeah.
us so that,
Hmm.
people see this pretty flower, and so they harvest it and bring it somewhere
Yeah.
else, and because it's pretty, it gets brought somewhere, right? And so it's the same thing, like, so the same for India, right?
Yeah.
Like the British tried to suppress it because they saw the beauty of it and the side effects of it and all these kind of things. So they tried to do things to it, but ultimately it was designed like that, because
Mm.
now, because of that, now they all
Yeah.
speak English and they can go in the world and speak the language, the global language, and and now it became exponential.
Yeah.
Now everybody knows what yoga is. Now
Yeah.
it
Right.
became an
Exactly.
exponential
Hmm.
thing. So it's all designed, like there is nowhere to go. Like really the universe is designed like this, and you can't get out of the laws of the universe. It's really how it is. And so no matter what people
Yeah.
do, we all will go towards consciousness. It's
Yeah.
inevitable.
And
It's just a matter of time.
I think that, it's not that somebody's better than another person because they're more conscious per se. It how we measure these things is as diverse as all the people on the planet. But I think it's really comes down to just breathing and relaxing.
So it's not true that you're better than everybody.
No, no, because like, we're all, I think not everybody has to be awakened either. That's
Absolutely,
not
I
necessary.
agree.
I think we're all here
To fulfill a purpose again.
experiencing, like you said, I'm being trained in, I have 10 toxic boyfriends and
Yeah.
whatever it is.
No, but I think
I'm learning
everything
this thing right now,
everything
and
fulfills a purpose, but I feel like ultimately, this is my own view of this, obviously. I think what the universe is trying to do is to make us fulfill that purpose
yeah.
consciously, because we need to become the universe and to stop suffering, because the suffering comes from not knowing that we are fulfilling a purpose. So if you know that you're fulfilling a purpose, and that
Yeah.
purpose is, digging soil every day,
Hmm.
then you do that with happiness, because you're fulfilling a purpose, you're the whole, instead of suffering through it. So I feel like what the universe is trying to do is to decrease the level of suffering that we all experience, because what we experience is what the universe experiences as well. It's like we are the universe.
Right.
If the majority of us is suffering, the
Yeah.
universe is suffering.
But
So what the
also,
universe is doing is going away from pain and away from suffering by increasing our level of consciousness, so that we do the same things, but without the suffering of it, because we are aware that we are the whole, that we are just in the process of doing something, like achieving, building something for the whole.
yeah, but also there needs to be kind of this balance between the light and the dark in order for this relative world to exist. And I think it's important to remember that and to be in the place where, again, like we were saying before, to understand that everyone is on their own step in the journey. Everyone is here to learn specific lessons, and just because your lessons might be more difficult, more awakened lessons, it doesn't mean that someone who's, still trudging through the mud of ignorance isn't
Right.
doing something very valuable and important. And that also, this is, if we do look at this as an infinite universe, which I think it truly is, the more people that get enlightened, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be less unenlightened souls out there. There's still going to be
Right.
an infinite number of unenlightened souls, and it's this kind of loop. And again, this is relating to the Buddhist and the Hindu systems where we're in this cycle, and it's the way that it works is it's not like a linear thing that you get to the end and you're done. It's something that resets, and it's something that continually moves and spins. And it is possible to exit off of that, but it doesn't mean that once you leave this wheel of existence that the wheel stops being. The wheel will continue to exist, and the wheel will continue to spin, and people will continue to fill all of the roles to flush out all of the different vibratory states of this world. And kind of, I think that ties back
Right.
into the whole theme of sound and music that we were talking about earlier. Every
Yeah.
aspect of this world has an innate vibration, and without
Yes.
each one of those little frequencies, you wouldn't have that complete whole concert of, oh, you'd only have that minus a little bit. So if something moves out of one of those roles, something else will move in to fill it. It's this kind of this completion, this wholeness of the universe requires something to be at all of the different levels, and requires there to be this different shades, these different degradations of what consciousness is, what level of
Right.
openness you have access to, what things are being presented into your field, how much love you're experiencing, how much suffering you're experiencing. All of the different shades need to be there for this world to be as complete and as beautiful as it is.
Yeah.
I like to see things as like to see everything, including the universe, as a tree, and ultimately consciousness is
You
the
like trees,
flowers.
don't you?
I like plants a lot. I feel like I'm very, very connected to plants. Because we're like, I see things like this, like really a plant that in time we just don't see. As you said, we are just in this present moment, which is just a fraction of the entirety, but the entirety looks really like a tree in time, in which consciousness is the flowers. And so
Mm.
there is always a season in which consciousness peaks, and it's the flower season, and the flowers are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately it's a cycle, and so things tend to then go back, and then we
Mm-hmm.
have winter again. So everything, the universe follows these cycles and these
Mm-hmm.
seasons, and we as a society, we can see through history, we had dark times and happy times, and like we had light and we had darkness, and it's all in cycles, in waves that we perceive. Like we as humans, we live 50, 100 years, and so we don't really see the entire cycle. But if we see history, we can see these
Yes.
waves of consciousness and darkness that
Mm.
alternate with each other. And right now we are in a peak of darkness, and so we are about, you can see like all of these communities of people who are very conscious now. We
Yeah.
are about to bloom, we're going towards spring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what is happening in the world. So it's normal that before spring we are in winter. So right now we are in
Mm-hmm.
winter, but we have already the first blossoms of spring that are sprouting, they're like pruning.
Yeah.
So we really are in that phase right now. But what I think really, and this is my personal view, and you guys can disagree with it, or like maybe the yoga philosophy is different, but like this is my personal perception of it that I had through my Kundalini awakening as well.
Mm.
That what is really happening and what is supposed to happen is that ultimately all the cells, all the molecules of this tree are going to become awakened, and they're all going to become conscious of being the entire tree. And so some of them are going to be in the roots, and they're going to be digging the soil in the darkness. Some are going to be the flowers who are in the light. And so darkness and light happen, exist at all times, because the universe is a spectrum of things. It's a spectrum that goes from the darkest dark to the brightest light. So that spectrum will never disappear, because unless we restart contracting and getting back to the wholeness that the universe was at the beginning before the Big Bang. But until we are in this phase in which we're blooming and going away from the Big Bang and expanding, we're always going to have this spectrum of very dark and very light things, and very much hate and love. These are just the spectrums in which the universe has been divided. So we're always going to have those things. But
Mm-hmm.
becoming awakened means also understanding, having the consciousness of the whole, and at the same time being in the roots of being a flower. So understanding that you're just part of a whole and you're just having a different role, and enjoying that and doing that with consciousness, you know. And the ego is part of it, in the sense that like it's always there in a sense, but at the same time you are not it. Like, you know, you understand that that's just a tool that the universe uses for you to keep doing your thing, because otherwise the universe cannot rely on you doing your job without an ego, because you're not conscious of what you're doing. You know, like we will never procreate unless we were unconscious. You know, we will never do certain things and do wars or conquer the world unless we were unconscious. But now that we are conscious, we can do the same things with in a consciousness. It can come from consciousness, from love, from instead of from fear, and from, you know, like it can come from a different place. So we're gonna be fulfilling the same functions, this is my view, but with a consciousness of what we're doing.
I think
In
that's
the
why
yogic perspective, in the yogic perspective, there's like it's again, there's a cycle, and this is the cycle of the yugas. And the yugas is the different ages of existence that we experience. And you can say this is as a universal concept or a concept of just the earth, but basically you go through these four different degradations of experience. And right now it's said that we're in the lowest age, which is called Kali Yuga. It's the age of darkness.
Woo!
And yeah, congratulations us. And
Rock
then you
on,
move
let's
forward
go.
through the different ages, and you get to the Satya Yuga, which is the highest age, the age of enlightenment, which I think is similar to what you were speaking of, Nancy, where, you know, all of the beings realize that they're just part of the whole. They all have the enlightened perspective. You know, they can still be doing the same actions. Like their dharma might be to go to war, and they might be to kill, but they're doing that through consciousness. And you can see there's, you know, the one of the classic scriptures of Hinduism is the Bhagavad Gita, and in that it's describing a war, you know, and one of the main characters, Krishna, who is, you know, an avatar, a divinely awakened being, he's still fighting in this battle. He's still, you know, in this fight, but he's doing it through consciousness, and there's no trace of ignorance left in his being, but he's still fulfilling the role that he came to this earth to play. But
Yeah, I feel
then
like,
again,
just to
this
add to
cycle
that,
goes
because
back, you know, it goes back, and
people can
then
perceive people can
just like,
perceive war
yeah,
as a
sorry, go
very
ahead.
unconscious thing to do. But like, if we realize that we are equal to all the other beings in the universe, including plants, you know, like if you trim your you know, grass, you know, on your lawn, or like on your field, are you making a war? You know, you're
Yeah,
trimming
I
grass, you
mean,
know. So it's really like
things have to die in order for us to live.
yeah,
It's the
exactly.
nature of
So
relative world, you know?
exactly. So it's like because we see ourselves as the protagonist of this universe, as different and more important. And, you know, kill a human being is different than cutting a plant. From a universal perspective, it's exactly the same. You know, it has a purpose of cleansing sometimes, and a purpose of recycling matter, you know, so that once you recycle matter, it's like if we have to reincarnate, we need to have bodies. We need to have molecules to reincarnate in, you know. If something in a place is going very wrong, maybe the universe is trying to recycle matter so that things can grow again, can bloom again in a different way, instead of waiting 100 years for people to die, you know, like instead of waiting, it kind of recycles. So I feel like we perceive human beings as better than, but reality is that when you change, when you remove the grass from your field, or when you kill the plants in your field, for the universe is the same as when you kill a human being. It's really the same. And so like it's really a matter of like recycling things. And so even
And
the like
perspective.
sorry, what?
And perspective, you know, from your perspective,
In
mowing the
perspective,
lawn, it
yeah.
doesn't
And
seem like a hostile act, but from the perspective of, you know, the grass and the little insects living there, their, you know, their whole field is being raised by, you know, weapons that they have no comprehension of.
unfortunately, this is how unconscious humans do things, you know. But again, that is right now fulfilling, for example, the purpose of bringing light about all these people behind these things. Because now, for example, the humanity is realizing how bad the world is, you know, that there are some powers, you know, like making wars and making things. And without this genocide, we would have never realized about all the people in power that are doing these things, so it's really like fulfilling a purpose of making us aware of what is going on and bringing more light on things that we usually will not see, or on the censorship that is surrounding this,
Yeah.
for example, on the censorship and all the corruption around it. So
Yeah.
we're really seeing the devil in the world thanks to what is happening in Gaza.
Well, that's why this work is so important, whether you're doing your transcendental meditation or your music healing, or you're finding a way to transcend. Like your tree metaphor is beautiful because it's also like you have the relative world above and the unmanifest below, and the unmanifest is the foundation of the tree. It can't exist without. So those of us that have been fortunate enough to find these practices to reveal the unmanifest and the power from that and the support, it then will help the tree bloom even more powerful. So I mean, our natural state is a balance of the transcendental unmanifest informing and dictating really the relative world that we experience here. So it's super important. And you're talking about the Kali Yuga, and the yugas. An interesting way to look at it is as layers of consciousness.
So what is, let's give a brief explanation.
So the Kali Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga is the next one.
Then
and
Treta.
then I forget the other one, that the Sattva
Treta,
is
and then
the
Satya.
Satya. Okay.
So what are these things for our audience?
So from what I understand, and there, you probably know more, but I'll just speak from my understanding. It's they're epochs of time that can be thousands to millions of years, depending on who's measuring it. But also another way that I discovered is that there can be thought of as layers of consciousness. So the Kali Yuga that we're in is the surface, and you can look at it as the ocean, right? The surface has the waves, it's chaotic, pointing, it's being manipulated by the wind. There's all kinds of stuff. This is also the mental level, right? And then below that is the Dwarpa, which is like legend. It's the Mahabharata, that the most epic story ever written, was written like 5, probably 10,000 years ago. Incredible. And it's kind of like, it's set at the age of the crack of the ages, coming from the Dwapara Yuga to the Kali Yuga, where we are now, at that epic battle where the Bhagavad Gita takes place. And the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, right? And it's so it's this incredible thing. And as I was reading the Mahabharata, the best one that I found is the translation by Ramesh Menon. I mean, I couldn't put it down, and it's 1,200 pages. I mean, it's bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey by 7 times or something. And everything comes from it: the Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, all these great ideas of these epic tales of magic, and incredible. But as I'm reading it, I'm understanding that part of it is giving me a window into the Dwapara Yuga that's underneath the Kali Yuga consciousness, right? So it's by reading this text, I'm actually starting to be shaped and experienced and tapped into a little bit this layer of consciousness that's underneath the chaos, that starts to be magical and of divine purpose, and gods and men commingling, and all this stuff, where Krishna is the chariot driver of Arjuna, and it's this whole magical, yet there's still wars, there's still, they're hunting for meat. I don't think there's no mention of vegetarianism in the Mahabharata, and it's the oldest text in the world. So it's like this whole thing where it's very real. There's real human things going on there too, but has more divine purpose, it seems like, and Dharma, I guess, the whole theme of that. So
right, yeah, and it's like the way I've heard it described. So the Kali Yuga we live in right now is the dark age, and this is the age of materiality, where the mind of the common man, this is like the average person, is only based on the material world, only based on the 5 senses that we are experiencing, based on acquiring, based on conquering, based on really established in ego, selfishness. So that's the age that we live in now. Welcome, everyone. And
Woo!
yeah, going into the Dwapara Yuga, this is the age of understanding energy. So this is where, and there's also some people that say that we are transitioning now back into the Dwapara Yuga. This is one perspective that's taken from a saint named Swami Sri Yukteswar, who basically he said that we're entering the Dwapara Yuga, and this was characterized by the scientific understanding of the atom and like these subatomic forces. But
Mm.
this is the age of energy, basically understanding the role that energy has in our life, and moving into higher aspects where, again, as you said, I think it was very beautiful, like gods and men are interacting, and we're all in this play, and there's generally more consciousness in the average person. And then you go to the next level up, which is the Treta Yuga, which is characterized by the powers of the mind. And what they say in this age is this is when all the powers that are written about in the Vedas and by all of the ancient yogis, these are become commonplace. Rather than picking
Mm.
up like a phone and talking to someone, you can speak to them through the
No
power of your
need.
mind. There's no need for that
Don't need
anymore.
smartphones.
Exactly. So then this age is even higher level of consciousness is inhabited by the average man. And then Satya Yuga is the golden age where, everyone is born enlightened. There's no need for any real spiritual practice because you're already born 100% in alignment. You're born living your dharma. And the idea with this is that, it's a cycle that goes back and forth. So either in the
Mm.
ascending or the descending. And right now we're in the ascending arc. So we're at the bottom, but we're slowly starting to inch our way up a little bit higher on
Yeah,
the spectrum.
Yeah.
that's
Beautiful.
what I'm saying.
And
Like we're going towards that, like
right.
we are like really the blossoms of this blooming phase in which we're
Yeah.
going. And what he's saying about, it's really about making the next step in our brain evolution. Because once
Mm.
we start tapping, and a lot of kids today, I think autism, for example, I think most people don't understand that people with autism often have an impairment between verbal communication and nonverbal communication. Because I think, and this is my personal perspective, I should check whether what the scientific literature said about that. My personal perspective that these are kids who are already born into the with a better cortex, but the cortex doesn't need language. The cortex
Mm.
is more of a conceptual type of knowledge. And so this impairment, we call it impairment because we look from our perspective, in which we use language and we use rational thinking in a way that we perceive as normal, but gives us a lot of stress. And it's that kids who are already in their cortex, maybe they don't need communication that much. They don't need verbal communication that
Mm.
much because they think in a different way.
Mm.
So they're very intelligent, just a different type of intelligence. And because of that, they tend to be very, very perceptive as well, like very understanding. So that is a form of communication. It's just a different form of communication as to what we are used to. And so moving forward in the next phases is going to look like really changing our way of being, like because tapping into different parts of the brain means that we're going to be expressing ourselves in a different way. We're going to be perceiving the world in a different way. And so even going through from generation to generation towards this blooming that I'm talking about is going to look like a real change in how humans are as a species. And I feel like this is going to create initially a lot of conflict, but ultimately also going towards consciousness means that people are going to become more kind of like a cushion for these sort of stress and conflict, because oftentimes people with autism tend to be very refractory. So they are refractory to stimuli, to if you try to stress them out, oftentimes they tend to just step back, like, and stay in their alignment.
Mm.
And so it's really like moving towards consciousness is going to look like we, like the older generations, trying to like strive for something, or like trying to struggle for whatever we're trying to do in our egoic reality, and the new generations be like, oh, I feel like I'm good. Like that's really the Gen Z's generation.
Right.
It's very much like that also. It's very much like people who are very much kind of refractory to
Sure.
the rest of the world in their own thing and doing their own thing because their brain is different. So we're going to be born step by step more and more into with a brain that is different, and so allows us to be different, to be more enlightened without having to go through all these suffering, for example. That definitely, I think that's
Yeah.
how it's going to happen in general. It must happen that way in a sense. And we have done it already. We've seen it, like we are as humans already a more evolved version of that kind of brain, like we've seen it through animals. And so we are going towards more and more consciousness. We have already done that. We are the expression of it. And we just, there are a lot of species that are more evolved than us. For example, dolphins, who have a very evolved cerebral cortex, so we're going towards that, which means that also our communication is going to change. But like, I think still music is going to play a huge role into this, into, especially now, we're also, our taste in music is changing, like, and that reflects how our brain is changing, because all the new generations listen to a lot of EDM music. And EDM music, what is it in the end? It's a form of transcendental music, as compared to rock. Rock was beautiful, but it's awakening potential laid into the lyrics, right? It was really about the lyrics. And so it was about language, because the part of the brain of those generations was really very much about the language. And so instead we moved from that to EDM music that has no lyrics at all sometimes, but the frequencies tap into the part of the brain that allows us to be conscious and to be like, now, for example, that's my favorite. Like, I only listen to EDM music if I want to have fun kind of music, or just frequencies, or musica medicina, which is the only music that I listen to that has lyrics, because it's really like all the other music drags me back, which means that it's a lesser evolved form of music, because it taps into my like more lesser evolved
it's
part
just
of the brain.
more, it, like you said, it taps into the intellect or the storyline. The mind follows a story with the lyrics, so it's a different feeling than with just the tones is taking you somewhere.
Yeah,
More open.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. And guys,
Well, yeah,
please
this has
stay
been
until the end
amazing.
of the episode. I don't know what
I
how
think
long do we
I
have?
think it's been about 2 hours now, so I think now is
Okay.
probably a good time
Well,
to wrap up. But I would love, Tom, if you have a couple of minutes, if there's anything you want to promote, if there's anything you have coming up, any events, any programs you want to just give a little shout
Sure.
out to, I'd love to give you a couple of minutes for that.
and again, we're gonna be listening to his concert, like to a
Right.
piece of his concert at the end of this episode. So you guys stay tuned, like keep watching, and he's gonna actually add like an actual concert, probably from his studio, because he has a recording studio as well. So it's gonna be an actual concert. So guys, stay tuned, because you're gonna be listening to incredible transcendental music played by him. So please, like, tell us more about what you do.
Sure. Well, today I'm offering a music healing circle, 4 to 6 p.m., but I know this podcast is probably going to come out in like a couple weeks or whatever, but I do them regularly. I do them in Pasadena every other Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m., and in Santa Monica, West LA area, at least once a month.
Not enough, I would say.
Yeah, and hopefully to do more, and it's growing in its own way, which is exciting. But you can find out about me at tomrossi.com, Tomrossi, Rossi Asti Spumante, like the wine. And music healing dot, what did I, musichealing.net. I think I got that. So you can follow me there on Instagram at Tom Rossi Music to stay up to date. I just released a ambient album, and I'll be releasing more stuff soon. This one's called Space Time.
I loved it. It's on
And
Spotify, guys. I love that album. It's very beautiful.
it's all recorded in 432 hertz, which, like you were saying about 108, is because it adds up to 9. 8 and 1 is 9, and there's this whole phenomena about 9, and so when you tune instruments, instead of the sharper 440, you tune them to 432 for whatever reason. It lines with the symmetry of the universe, and that all of the summation of all the variables of the notes add up to 9. I mean, it feels good. It feels
Well,
different in
what
its
they
own
say
way.
is that
So
the frequency of ohm, like the universal frequency, is actually tuned to 432, I think, 0.1 hertz.
yeah. I mean, it feels better. It feels different in ways. So these are all designed for transcendence. As you listen, it's deep relaxation, synth stuff, and piano. But I also have other stuff, world orchestral music with wordless hymns, and my first album, Salmahar, and I actually just got the rights back to my second album, which is a follow-up to Samahar. It's called Connections, and it has all these wonderful African and Persian musicians, and it's a beautiful record that I'll be working on finishing the, remastering, and I'll be releasing that soon. So stay tuned.
And you're on Spotify as Tom
And I'm on
Rossi.
Spotify, Tom Rossi. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm putting all my stuff there.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
Well,
you also have a YouTube channel, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So YouTube channel, Tom Rossi, Spotify, Tom Rossi,
Yeah,
and
YouTube
Mythic
channel.
Healing on Instagram and TomRossi.com.
Tom Rossi
I
Music
love
on
all these
Instagram.
channels because I really love what you do, and your music is really incredible. And thank you, especially thank you for doing this for us, because everybody has his own role in the world, and his purpose is to awaken us thanks to his music, and to make us transcend thanks to his music. And again, like I've tried his music, and I went through this transcendence, which was incredible. So I really suggest everybody, like, if you guys are in the area, like in the Lake Pasadena area, please check out what he does and go to his events, because they're really therapeutic, and like it can be an awakening experience that is comparable to psychedelics. It's really like beautiful, but without the negative effects of it or the purging effects of it. Like it's really just about it drugs your consciousness in a very natural, organic way towards awakening and a higher state of consciousness. And it's incredible. Thank you, Tom. Thank
Yeah,
you
and
for
the
being
arc
here.
of it is a little bit like a ceremony too, the way I go from instrument to instrument, and sort of take you on a nice arc.
Because you also played in ayahuasca ceremony, so you have
Yes,
that experience
for
that you
years.
use.
Yeah, I was professionally playing for ceremonies as a music guardian. Yeah, and I also do, it's a private practice as well. And the one-on-one is very powerful to really customize the music and really work. I do some energy work and the music, and we talk about things. It's just a nice deep time. So
yeah, I felt it. I felt like
beautiful.
you did, like this thing that you did, like that you tuned on my own vibe. It's beautiful, because I feel like what you do is really, you perceive like how the holes that people have, or like what people, like the potential people have to their highest self, and you tap into that path and you lead them towards that. Really, like that's what he does with his music. And like he kind of like fills the gap that you need to fulfill with the music, so you can synergize with the music and use that as an energy, transmute that energy into awakening. I loved it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Robbie,
thank
for
you,
being
Tom.
here.
Thank you, Nancy.
Guys, for listening to us.
And stay tuned for some of Tom's beautiful music, which is going to play right after this conversation is finished. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Now, enjoy Tom Rossi's music.